So basically, I had a miracle just happen in my life. And I think that many things are miracles. I think it's Albert Einstein, actually, who says you can either live as nothing, as if nothing is a miracle, or as if everything is a miracle. I think everything is a miracle. But with that said, I did just have like a really beautiful thing happen recently that I really felt was very definitely a miracle. I mean, there are some things that happen sometimes that just have the quality of an answer to prayer, I guess, or it's so unlikely and so directly in tune with something I was praying about or asking for. Like it's kind of just too obvious to think of it in any other way than a miracle. Yeah, and this was one of those things. I've had a lot of those things happen in my life. And I do think that the more that we listen to our inner guidance, the more those things become normal and just happen all the time. And I really believe that that's the way we're meant to be living. That's the way we're designed to live. And that's what we're really meant to be experiencing all the time. So I just wanted to tell about it, and parts of the story are pretty vulnerable if I'm going to tell the whole truth, and there's so many different pieces, so I'm just going to tell the story. So what happened recently was that I was able to take this natural dyeing class at Penland School of Crafts with Catherine Ellis and Joy Boutrup from Denmark. And this is a really special class. This class, I first learned about this class 7 years ago when I got back from Ireland. There's a lot of bugs right now flying in my face. I started sharing a studio with someone in the Marshall High Studios, and that's an artist community in Marshall, North Carolina. And so there were people coming in and out, talking about art, doing art, taking classes. And there was a friend of a friend who had just taken this class that was offered in the summer, and she was talking about it, and it just, yeah, it sounded really awesome. And I remember like wishing that I could have taken it. And I also remember asking her if she would teach me everything she learned in the class, which I guess was overwhelming to her or something. She kind of looked at me like, I don't know how I would do that. But I really wanted her to like offer a class and share what she had learned. And then I started hearing Catherine Ellis's name everywhere in relation to natural dyeing. That's also part of why I had been wanting to take this class. And then when I went out to New Mexico, that first year I was in New Mexico, I didn't have classes in the summertime, and I looked on the Penland catalog and I saw that this class was being offered that summer. That was 2019. And I really wanted to take it, and I applied for a work study scholarship and I didn't get it. And then I thought to myself, I should have just put it on a credit card or something and just taken it. I really want to learn that information from her, specifically from Catherine Ellis, because she's so well known in this area for being an expert in natural dyeing. It's just a special, like, precious class. So Penland started having a vaccine mandate when those mandates started being put into place. So did my own school, Southwestern College, and a lot of internship opportunities that I wasn't able to participate in. I chose to not get vaccinated, which I think I'll save all of my thoughts and opinions about that for another video if I ever make it. But obviously, yeah, so I wasn't able to take classes at Penland. Once I saw that they had that vaccine mandate, I thought to myself, well, I guess I'll never be involved with Penland again. And I had just come to that resolution within myself, like, okay, that's it for me in Penland. And then I found myself moving back to this area. I discovered almost immediately that I had a neighbor who was someone I already knew, who I had worked with when I first took a class at Penland 9 years ago. That was 2014, the fall of 2014. I did a concentration in encaustic paintings at Penland, and it was very powerful and life-changing. So that's 8 weeks of classes, and it's full-time every day, and you live there and eat all your meals there. So yeah, it was an extremely powerful time, life-changing time for me. I had a work trade scholarship where I worked on the grounds crew for the first 2 weeks before the class started and 1 week after the class ended. What happened was that I made a connection with one of those people, a man about my age, and I started getting involved with him. And I'm gonna tell this honestly. So he turns out he had a girlfriend, and I didn't know that at first, but I did know it at the point when we started getting involved, and all we did was kiss several times. It's really vulnerable, especially to put out on something like YouTube, but it feels important to me to tell it, and I want to. I do, I really do. So, so we didn't do anything beyond kissing, but we did kiss several times, and we were definitely sneaking around behind his girlfriend's back, and I knew about her. She also worked at Penland, so I didn't really know her personally, but I saw her there. It wasn't good, and I don't feel good about it. And so actually after that class ended, after those 3 months ended, I ended that relationship immediately and never picked it back up again. But I always felt like there was this like dark energy whenever I would go back to Penland, and I always felt like there was definitely this kind of double life feeling especially when I interacted with the other people who worked at Penland with him and who were on the grounds crew or maintenance crew. I felt really horrible. Just like I was hiding something from them, which I was. And it was heartbreaking to me because I really valued those relationships a lot. And since that time was so beautiful and precious to me and life-changing to me, those relationships meant a lot to me. And so there was, this really like, feeling that I had where I knew I wasn't being honest, and I wanted to clean that up and tell them and like come out about it, and I didn't want to hide anymore, but I was really scared to do that, and I wasn't really there all the time, so I didn't have a lot of interaction with them after the class was over. But so I ended up, after I moved here recently, I discovered very quickly that one of those people who worked alongside me and that man lives right next door to me, and she also runs a local grocery shop, like a really small little shop in town where you can get local food, which is where I'm gonna end up going because there's not really any other health food stores around here. And so I saw her there, and I immediately had this feeling of like, I need to tell her it's time. And right away I told her, I have something I need to confess to you, but it didn't feel like the right time to just like spill it all while I was, getting my groceries. But it was definitely on my mind. I knew that I felt like the universe had presented this opportunity for me to clean up that karma. And so fast forward a little bit, what happened was that I looked at my bank account and I realized that I was like really low on money. And for me, I think what happens is in those moments is that I kind of wake up, and I can't remember why, but for some reason the thought occurred to me, it's time, I need to go talk to Megan, I need to tell her. So I went to talk to her almost immediately after I realized that. And it turned out to be the perfect timing, of course. She was just closing down the shop and had the time to sit with me. So I told her everything, told her what happened. I felt a lot better. There was this like weight that fell off of me. And it's also not a secret anymore. I just left the shop kind of with this like emotional feeling of like having let go of something. And I kind of drove around aimlessly for a little while, and then I just decided to drive to Penland. There was hardly anyone around, and it felt really magical. So I just got out of my car and started walking around and just like talking to Penland, to the consciousness of Penland. And it was just this magical, magical feeling. It felt so like I was kind of being welcomed home by Penland. That's what it felt like to me. And so they keep the studios open, the buildings open, and I often go into the textile studio because it's so beautiful, and it's all wood everywhere, and it's just like there's these huge windows. It's just like a magical studio department, the textiles department. So I have been going in there regularly over the years, just kind of looking around, wandering. They have all these looms in there, and I'll just go look at the looms. So I did. So I just went in there and kind of spent some time. I looked through some of the books. And then I walked around downstairs and by the front office, and they have their brochure there, and I just took one. I love looking through the catalog, so it's just really inspiring to see what they have being offered. So I took the catalog home and started paging through it in bed, and I noticed that Catherine Ellis and Joy's class was being offered again. And I also noticed that they didn't have that paragraph about the vaccine mandate that they had in the catalog before. So I got curious. So I looked at the website, and it said, sure enough, they had lifted the mandate. So it was kind of amazing. That alone felt like a miracle, because it totally changed. Suddenly this door was open that wasn't before. Catherine Ellis and Joy's class was in the second session. So I guess it was about 2 weeks out from that class starting. So in my mind I was like, well, it's certainly too late to apply for a scholarship, and of course the class is full. So if you don't know this class, or if you're not from this area, or if you don't know Catherine Ellis, that class is like a coveted class. She's a famous natural dyer, not only in this area, but internationally. So that class fills up fast, and I'm sure there is a huge waiting list. So that in my mind, I was like, there's no way I can take that class at this point. But I decided to put myself on the waiting list just because I could for the first time. Because they had lifted that vaccine mandate, I realized that now I could put myself on a waiting list. And so I did. So interesting to look back on that moment, because I had no expectations at all to be in that class. So then I dog sat for some people who live just outside the Penland campus, and they take their dog for walks on the trails in Penland, and suggested that I do that, and I ended up doing it every day. So I was there every day for when that first summer session started, and the students started coming in, and I just was thinking about that class, and I started praying. I just really wanted to take that class, and it was weird. It was like I was praying that I would be able to take that class, while at the same time fully knowing that I wasn't going to be able to take it. But my heart wanted to pray for that, and so I just did. I could just feel that happening in my heart, like I just want to ask for this. So I did, and I kept praying for it. And I opened my computer and looked at my email, and it said that there was a last-minute cancellation, and I was first on the waiting list, which I couldn't believe, because how on earth could I be first on the waiting list? Maybe there was other people on the waiting list, but none of them could join the class at such short notice. That's my guess, probably. They probably went through several people before they got to me. I don't know. But it was really, it was probably like 5 days before the class started, if that, actually. Yeah, probably less. So it just felt like, oh my God, this is an answer to prayer. That's just how I interpreted that. And yeah, so I thought, well, I can't afford it. What am I going to do? But in my mind, I had decided that if I had the opportunity to do that class, I would just put it on a credit card, which I don't use credit cards. I don't have one. But I drove to the bank, to my credit union, and asked them if I could get a credit card. And I don't have a regular job right now, so they just said no. And I also have another credit union in New Mexico still, so I called them up and I applied for a credit card through them. And they said they would let me know later in the day. Yeah, so later in the day I got an email from them rejecting my application. So I started driving home. Yeah, I guess I was just driving home thinking, oh well, I guess I can't take that class. I guess I'm just not going to be able to take that class. But there was something in me that was just like, no, don't give up that easily. And the thought occurred to me, so I'm part of this community email network in this area called the CELO list, and it's really awesome. So I'm like so into intentional communities at this point. I mean, that's where it's at. I've lived at the Commons on the Alameda out in Santa Fe, which is an intentional co-housing community, and I've lived at Earth Haven Eco Village here in Black Mountain, North Carolina, which is an eco village. And I mean, community is an amazing thing. So I definitely lean heavily on that, on community, and I'm not shy to ask for help really anymore. So the thought occurred to me that I could reach out to that community because I had sent an email out to the community a couple weeks prior saying that I wanted to offer some classes and all these different crafts that I've been exploring lately. Handmade paper making, natural dyeing, earth pigment, watercolor paint making, and of course black walnut ink I use a lot in my art, and caustic painting. So all of those things. So I put that out on the email and I got a lot of responses from people saying that they were interested. But I also said I hadn't set it up on my website yet, and I was going to put it on my website so people could sign up through my website. So a lot of people reached out to me and said, let me know when you have that up on your website. I'd really like to do that. So I knew there was interest. So my idea as I was driving home was, what if I get those classes up on my website and I send out like an emergency announcement and say, hey, I've got these classes up on my website. If you're someone who said they were interested, it would really help me if you would sign up now, because I need the money to take this really special natural dyeing class. And if I take this class, then I'm going to be that much more qualified to teach, and the class is going to be that much better. So I did that. And it was amazing. The response from people blew my mind. It was just like immediately people started reaching out to me, signing up for classes, in some cases just wanting to support me and send me money. It was incredible. And I did not have really any expectation that would work. I just thought, why not try? And yeah, so it was really beautiful. I wanted to backtrack a little bit and say I've been part of this women's group here in this area. We meet in person, and I was talking about my art and natural dyes. So this was like several weeks ago, and one of the women in the group said, oh, I would love it if you would teach a class on natural dyes. I was like, oh, I don't really know what I'm doing. I don't know if I should, and she kind of seemed a little bit upset with me actually, and she was like, you don't need to be an expert, I just want to learn what you know. And it hit me like, yeah, you're right, I could just teach what I know to people. So that's the reason why I put that out on the CELO list to begin with. So that's how that started. So all these pieces to the story feel like little miracles. I think it's just about how small things lead to other things, and how when we are listening, sometimes our inner guidance guides us to do things that doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense in the moment, but it's like leads to something else, that leads to something else, that unfolds into this beautiful miracle. That's the feeling of being loved by God, the Great Spirit, the Tao, the universe, the loving energy that is all around us and that flows through all things. Yeah, that's what it felt like to me. And it was such a beautiful class. And there's more to the story. This class had a prerequisite that people know how to weave before the class, because it was a combined weaving, natural dyeing class, and they weren't going to teach people how to weave. They just expected people to know how to weave, and then the class is about combining weaving with natural dyeing and all the cool ways that you can do that. So I didn't know how to weave, and I knew that was a prerequisite. I saw that on the catalog, but because I had no expectation of getting into that class whatsoever, I didn't try to learn to weave until I saw that email. But actually I did have the thought. I remember having the thought in my mind, like before I got that email, that if I really believed that I could manifest this class, I would be preparing for it. But then I would just push that out of my mind, because I was like, I'm not going to get into that class, and I know it. So I didn't prepare. But then when I got that email and all that money started showing up, I realized, like, I need to learn how to weave. So I was nervous, but I went and watched lots of YouTube videos, and then on one of the YouTube videos there was a list underneath in the description of books that she recommended, and one of them was Learning to Weave by Deborah Chandler. So I just clicked on that link and I started reading what you could read online. It was obvious that this person was an expert not only in weaving but in teaching, and the way that she was describing, like for beginners, how to weave was unusually comprehensive and full of like her own personality and humor. It just made it very, very easy for a beginner. I think some people just have that skill, and she definitely has it, like a genius kind of. Like a genius for teaching. So I immediately felt drawn to that book, and I ordered it from the library and went and checked it out and just read through the entire first chapter, which was like how to weave for total beginners. And I was able to really understand. I just felt like I get it. I'm not confused. I get this. I get what she's saying. I understand every step of this. It doesn't feel overwhelming or confusing to me, like I'm tracking. So I felt okay. I did go to Penland again to ask the consciousness of Penland for help learning to weave. This is how I roll. So yeah, I mean, these are things that I believe are very real, and I definitely feel a response when I do them. So I went and sat next to the dye shed. There's this really old dye shed that is over 100 years old that is there on campus, and I sat next to the dye shed and just explained the situation to the consciousness of Penland and asked for help learning to weave. And it was the most incredible, beautiful night. The sun was going down and it was a full moon just right in front of me over the mountains, and then the fireflies started coming out and they were just all over the beautiful hills of Penland. It was such a beautiful moment. I just pay attention to things like that because I feel really loved in those moments and heard, and I believe that that's real. So I left that night feeling like I had been heard, and then I went to like the first session at Penland for the class is just explaining the safety, like the safety orientation for the studio. I went to that, and then as I was leaving, there was this red-headed woodpecker. Is it pileated woodpecker? Red-headed woodpecker. swooped down in front of my car and started flying in front of me in the direction that my car was going, like it was guiding me. It was so beautiful. But I just felt like it was a sign that everything was going to be okay. And then later in my drive, I hit a bird. There was this little bird that flew right into my windshield and I hit it. And I was like, oh no, what does that mean? I don't know. But here's what ended up happening. So I showed up at the class. It turned out there were a lot of people who were kind of scrambling, or several people who didn't feel that confident about weaving. And I was gonna not tell anybody that I didn't know what I was doing, but those other people were totally open about it and asking for help, which was really encouraging to me. And then I was like, oh, okay. So I started asking for help too, and the wonderful teacher's assistant who was there was so kind and generous, helping people get set up, get their looms set up. And yeah, so once I started asking for help, everything went pretty smoothly. And I did need a little bit help getting started, for sure. Once I got started weaving, it was like, okay, I got this. And I actually was the first one to finish, which I know was because I used thick yarn and I was doing a really simple weaving, and other people were doing things more complex with thinner yarn. But still, I was the first one to take my weaving off the loom and start dyeing it. So, I don't know. I felt good about that, and then I made a second weaving. But yeah, at one point Catherine came over to me and she was with some other people, and she said that it was remarkable that I had learned so quickly, which made me feel really good. Yeah, I think the other part of that I just want to say is that I could have I reached out to two people I know in the area who I'm friends with who are weavers, who weave, and I asked them if they could walk me through. So before the class started, I asked them if they could walk me through the basic steps of weaving, and both of them got back to me and said, I can't teach you how to weave in this short amount of time. Sorry. You can't, they basically said, you can't learn to weave in this short amount of time. So I was like, oh shit. And I thought about, one of them suggested, why don't you just call Catherine and, tell her the situation, and I've heard she's a really kind person, and I'm sure she'd rather have a full class with someone who doesn't know how to weave than have someone missing from her class. So I considered doing that, but here's the thing that I've experienced so many times in my life. People telling me I can't do something when, in fact, not only can I do it, but I can do it easily. And that I know my skills. Everyone has different aptitudes. And for me, making things with my hands, especially when it relates to textiles or painting and drawing, making things with my hands is something that I'm good at. That's who I am as a person. That's my skill set. So nobody knows what I'm capable of except me. Everything worked out just fine, and now I know how to weave, which is awesome. So I think that probably eventually I will be weaving my own fabric for my portrait paintings. So that's pretty much the whole story, and now I feel so much more capable of doing natural dyeing in an appropriate way. There's so many different pieces of this story that I want to share. It's maybe too long, but I took an earth pigment watercolor paint making class from Stella Maria Bear back in New Mexico. I guess it was about less than a year ago now. She just shared her thoughts about paint, basically earth pigment paint versus natural dyeing, and how she places a lot of importance on things being archival, especially as a professional artist who's selling her paintings. And in her experience, the natural dyeing things that she has purchased have faded, and she made it really clear that if something is going to fade, that is something that the person if someone's selling something that's going to fade, she feels like it's really important for that person to be very upfront about that to whoever's buying that thing, which I think is fair. And I really took that to heart, because I do sell things that use natural dyes and potentially fade, although I don't think the black walnut ink has faded or does fade. I feel pretty confident about that. A lot of artists use black walnut ink. All that to say that this class was really focused, the class I just took with Catherine and Joy was really focused on light, fast natural dyes and how to do natural dyes in a way that is very concerned with the light fastness, so that's a big deal for me. And then that felt like very synchronistic, I guess, especially after having taken that class with Stella and really taking that into consideration with my own paintings. I've thought about that a lot over the years and just not really known what to do about it. So this was so helpful to take this class, and yeah, I just feel really excited. I guess what I'm trying to say, to sum it all up, is that feeling that I had when I knew to go tell Megan what happened in that first class that I took 9 years ago, what I did with that man, that feeling of knowing what to do and then going and doing it and having the energy shift and really feeling that in my body and in the atmosphere around me, and knowing like that's what I've been guided to do, and I did it. And that's, for me, that's where it's at. Like, that is what life is about, being in that flow and having, and yeah, responding to that guiding. So it's not even really about the class itself, it's about connecting with that. And I've been feeling a little bit lost lately and kind of praying a lot about wanting to reconnect with that. I mean, so that's like the most important thing for me, is just that feeling of living from that place of, yeah, of inner guidance, and then watching how that unfolds and how one thing leads to another and how beautiful that is. Yeah, I mean, that's just amazing to me. That's something that we don't talk about in our culture very much. I think that it's being talked about a little bit more, but it's definitely not part of like the culture at large. I don't think that understanding of the world. And for me, from my experience, that is very real. It's not woo-woo. It's very real. It's very tangible. And that's how I live my life. And it's how I want to continue living my life. From that place, in that flow. Yeah, it's like the most beautiful thing that I can experience in this world and live in. Yeah. So that's what I have to say about that. And I just wish that for everyone. I think that clearing karma helps us to connect with that. I think that prayer helps to, I try to speak for myself because I don't know. I don't want to tell anyone what to do. For me, prayer helps with that, and clearing karma and getting quiet, getting silent, meditating helps me to connect with that, and just paying attention to what's happening in my body. Yeah. And trusting those really, really subtle ways that our body guides us, the cues, those really subtle cues. So that's what I have to say, and there's probably more to the story that I forgot to mention.